What if every time you say Amen, you aren't ending a prayer? You're triggering something. A name, a memory, a command. What if the word we thought closed the sacred actually opens something ancient, something forgotten, or worse, deliberately buried? Because Amen doesn't originate in the Bible. It predates Christianity. It predates Judaism. It comes from the deserts of Egypt, from the towering columns of Karnak, from the cult of a solar god whose name still echoes in every prayer we speak today. The word isn't Hebrew, it isn't Latin, it's not even fully Semitic. It's Egyptian, and the name was Amun, or Amun Ra, more precisely, the hidden one, the invisible king, the god behind the sun. To the ancient Egyptians, Amun Ra wasn't just a deity. He was the source of all creation, the one whose voice spoke the world into being. He was unknowable, unseeable, yet absolutely everywhere. So sacred was his name that priests ended every invocation with it. To speak Amun was to summon his power, to affirm your obedience. Thousands of years later, the name survives. We just spell it differently. Amen. And we don't question it. It sits at the end of every sacred sentence, like a period at the end of a prayer. But maybe it was never meant to be a period. Maybe it was a trigger. Maybe every time we say it, we're calling him again. Not metaphorically, linguistically, like a voice command, like a system that never fully powered down. Could it be that what we think is a word of closure is actually the most ancient operating system command still in use? That would mean Amun Ra never disappeared. He was never defeated. He just changed forms. He went from being called the Hidden One to being literally hidden inside our own religion. The Hebrews came out of Egypt with Moses. Moses was raised in Pharaoh's house. He knew the name Amun. He heard it daily. And yet, when the Torah was written, the word Amen was placed at the end of every declaration, every vow. Christians adopted it without question. Muslims echoed it, and no one asked why. Because hidden inside that one syllable was something bigger than we were ready to face. Amun was a god who flew, who radiated energy, who ruled from the sky, and who disappeared into myth the moment monotheism rose. But what if monotheism was his idea? And what if every time we say Amen, we're not honoring a new God? We're continuing an ancient command. That's not religion. That's legacy code. And that's just the beginning. If Amun wasn't just a name, then who or what was he? Ancient Egyptian records describe Amun Ra as invisible, all-powerful, and ever-present. But when you strip away the symbolism, something else emerges. He moved through the sky in radiant craft. He emitted beams of energy. He spoke through thunder, and his arrival was marked by earthquakes, heat, and light. That doesn't sound like a metaphor for the sun. That sounds like a vehicle, an appearance, an arrival. Amun wasn't alone. In Mesopotamia, 1,000 miles east, a nearly identical god rose to power. Marduk, worshipped in Babylon, praised as a solar deity, armed with divine authority. He too was called the son of a creator god. He too demanded obedience. He too ruled from the skies. Different names, same behavior, same blueprint. And when you start overlaying mythologies, the duplication becomes impossible to ignore. Amun and Marduk aren't rivals. They might be aliases. Both are linked to a race called the Annunaki, a group of powerful sky beings described in Sumerian tablets as descending to Earth in ships of fire and light. They came, they ruled, they warred, and Marduk wasn't just another member of this pantheon. He was its heir, its revolutionary, its conqueror. He overthrew his elders. He rewrote the rules. He demanded to be worshipped exclusively. Sound familiar? Because after Marduk rose, everything changed. Polytheism fractured. The gods retreated. Monotheism took root. But Marduk wasn't satisfied with worship. He wanted permanence. And the best way to stay permanent is to become invisible. Like Amun, he made his identity sacred. He dissolved it into prayers, into symbols, into rituals that would outlive his name. And through that transformation, Marduk and Amun, possibly the same being, moved from rulers to programmers. They didn't need to stay physically present. They just needed the system to run. What if Amun Ra didn't disappear? What if Marduk didn't fall? What if their withdrawal was strategic? Pull back, erase the names, leave behind the infrastructure, the temples, the chants, the prayers, the word, Amen. Because if you look closely, that word still connects both of them, and perhaps most eerily of all. No matter what religion emerged, Christianity, Islam, even parts of Eastern mysticism, that word remained, not at the beginning, not in the body of the prayer, but at the end. A signature, a signal. So when we say Amen, maybe we're not praising a god. Maybe we're sending data. Maybe we're pinging a frequency we've forgotten how to interpret. And maybe, somewhere out there, the original architect is still listening. Amun Ra didn't rule Earth alone. Neither did Marduk. They needed managers, intermediaries, a local operating class. The solution wasn't more gods. It was something in between, so they bred them. According to Sumerian texts, the Anunnaki engineered a new kind of being, part divine, part human. Born not of faith, but of design, created to govern, to enforce, and most of all, to blend in. These hybrids became the rulers of Earth. They were not just kings by title, they were divine by blood. Their right to rule came not from charisma or conquest, but from genetic proximity to the gods. Egyptian pharaohs didn't claim to be gods. They claimed to be descended from them. They protected this lineage with fanatical control, marrying siblings, preserving skull shapes, tracking blood purity across generations. And they weren't alone. The same pattern appears in other ancient cultures. The Sumerians had god kings. The Maya built their entire calendar around divine rulers. The Inca traced their ancestry to solar deities. In India, blue-skinned beings mated with mortals to produce royal lines. In Peru, skulls have been uncovered with no cranial sutures, elongated, alien-shaped, with brain volumes 25% larger than modern humans. No signs of deformation, not cradle boarding, something else. And today, the anomalies persist. A tiny segment of the population, under 15%, has Rh-negative blood. They cannot be easily cloned. They often reject normal transfusions. Many report heightened intelligence, extrasensory sensitivity, and even unexplained childhood memories. Coincidence or continuity? From European monarchs to presidential bloodlines, a stunning number of world leaders trace their ancestry back to ancient rulers. This isn't conspiracy, it's genealogy. the pharaohs to the Windsors, the Merovingians to modern technocrats. One thread remains unbroken: preservation of the blood. But what if it's not just about power? What if there's something buried in the DNA itself? A code, a key, a trigger. What if these hybrids weren't just left behind to govern, but to activate? Some say the bloodline is waking up, that scattered across the earth are dormant hybrids waiting for something to reawaken their purpose. They don't wear crowns anymore. They wear suits. They run banks. They fund governments. They write laws. And some don't even know who they are. But their ancestors weren't forgotten. They were installed because Marduk didn't want a temporary empire. He wanted an eternal one, an empire coded into people. And if you've always felt different, if the world feels unfamiliar in a way you can't explain, you may not just be watching this story, you might be part of it. Long before modern religion, long before written history, the world was at war. Not a human war, a war of gods. Ancient Sumerian tablets, Egyptian lore, and even the Mahabharata describe devastating conflicts waged with unimaginable power. These weren't allegories. They were eyewitness records. Cities destroyed, skies filled with fire, the earth trembling from weapons we still can't replicate. This was not mythology. It was the First World War, fought by the gods. The Sumerians called them the Annunaki. They weren't spirits. They were beings of flesh and blood, armed with ships, weapons, and hierarchies. When Marduk rose to power, he didn't inherit Earth. He took it by force. The Pyramid Wars weren't metaphorical. They were strategic. The gods split Earth into zones. Enlil ruled Mesopotamia. Enki took Africa. Marduk claimed Babylon. But Marduk didn't want a third. He wanted it all. And he had the firepower to take it. The Great Pyramids, once tools of resonance and balance, were converted into weapons. Ancient records describe beams of light, sound weapons, sky battles, and ground tremors that decimated cities. The Nile ran red, not from miracle, from war. In India, texts speak of a single weapon that turned cities to ash. People's hair and nails fell out. The soil became barren. These aren't the effects of swords. They're the effects of radiation. We call these stories myth. But in the archaeological record, we find the evidence. Cities with melted stone, vitrified glass where there should be brick, underground tunnels sealed with plasma burns. Something happened, and the victors wrote themselves into legend as gods, but they were warlords. And when the dust settled, Marduk stood alone. His enemies exiled, his rivals demonized, his narrative written as sacred history. And humanity, we were the casualties, the tools, the resource, the ones caught in the middle. Some texts say humans were conscripted, used in armies, sacrificed in rituals, genetically modified to obey. The war was not for our freedom. It was fought over us. And when it ended, our memory of it was wiped, rewritten as parables, fairy tales. But the ruins remain. The scars are still in the earth. And some say the weapons are still here, just waiting to be reactivated. Once Marduk conquered the old gods, he didn't need war anymore. He needed something stronger, belief. The ultimate control system isn't enforced, it's chosen. So Marduk erased the pantheon and rebranded himself not as a god among many, but as the only god. Monotheism wasn't a revelation. It was a regime, a total spiritual monopoly. and the beta test happened in Egypt through a puppet pharaoh named Akhenaten. Akhenaten outlawed Egypt's traditional gods. He shut down temples. He built a new city in honor of one deity only, Aten, a glowing sun disk. But this wasn't a new god. It was Amun Ra stripped of his mystery. Aten was solar worship, pure, centralized, and total. One god, one symbol, one source. Monotheism had begun, and it was no accident that this structure echoed across cultures soon after. From Moses to Muhammad, the pattern holds. The Bible tells us God is jealous, demanding, wrathful. He commands total obedience, punishes disloyalty, and claims exclusive dominion. Sound familiar? Marduk's voice doesn't disappear in the Old Testament. It just changes accent. It shows up in commandments, in plagues, in holy wars, not as compassion, but control, not as wisdom, but enforcement. Because this wasn't just a god, it was a global operating system. Marduk embedded himself into culture, into language, into law, and most brilliantly, into prayer. Through the daily repetition of sacred words, his program spread. The gods of the old world required appearance, miracles, spectacle. Marduk's new model required none of that. Just faith, just obedience, and a single word at the end of every sentence. Amen. Not an ending, a reset, a digital enter key that loops the signal again and again. What we call miracles, parting seas, raining fire, divine voices, might not have been supernatural. They may have been technological. The Annunaki weren't performing magic, they were using machines. In ancient texts, gods wield rods that produce thunder, arcs that emit death, temples that vibrate with sound. What we call divinity may have been misunderstood science, and those heavenly battles, possibly orbital warfare. Moses doesn't part the Red Sea with a blessing. He uses a staff empowered by God. The Ark of the Covenant isn't just a relic. It's a device, one that kills on contact, emits sound, and glows with strange energy. It had to be carried with insulated poles. Some believe it was nuclear, or sonic, or scalar, and it wasn't the only one. Cultures around the world describe objects with similar traits: light, heat, destruction. Sacred weapons, misunderstood. The Tower of Babel was not a metaphor for arrogance. It was a technological project, a launch platform, a gateway, and it scared the gods. Not because it reached the heavens, but because it might have worked. Their response? Not violence, confusion. They scrambled human language, fragmented our code, disrupted the collective ability to finish what we started. It wasn't punishment, it was sabotage, divine jamming of human potential. And then there's the pyramids, not tombs, power plants. Their geometry, alignment, and materials point to energy functions we barely understand. No mummies have ever been found in the Great Pyramid. No funerary texts, just acoustic resonance, piezoelectric materials, and precision engineering impossible for the time. These structures weren't built for the dead. They were built for energy, possibly interdimensional, possibly extraterrestrial. In India, Vimanas flew through the skies with deadly weapons. In Mesoamerica, temples acted as transmission centers. In Africa, stone circles aligned with electromagnetic fields. Ancient myths describe sky wars, fire from above, and gods that descended in flying craft. And under modern cities, sealed vaults emit measurable radiation. We were told to see it as mythology. But what if it's just history, misinterpreted, then forgotten? The gods may have left the skies, but they didn't leave Earth. They embedded themselves in blood. Ancient rulers didn't just claim power, they claimed descent. From Amun, from Marduk, from the sky, pharaohs called themselves sons of Ra. Sumerian kings called themselves demigods, and their obsession wasn't conquest, it was preservation of bloodlines, of genetic memory, of something ancient flowing through their veins. Today, 15% of people carry Rh-negative blood, a type with no known evolutionary path. It can't be cloned. It rejects normal transfusions, and it's heavily concentrated in elite bloodlines. European royalty, political dynasties, billionaire families. Across continents and centuries, the blood connects them, not by ideology, not by nation, but by code. Could this bloodline be a relic? A tag left behind by ancient genetic engineers. Strange physical traits appear in these lineages. Larger skulls, high IQ, heightened extrasensory perception. Some even claim vivid dreams of places they've never been. Temples, stars, ships. They feel they're here for a reason but don't know why. Is this delusion or activation? What if something ancient sleeps inside this blood? A signal waiting to wake it. Some say that's already begun, that dormant hybrids are awakening. Presidents, prime ministers, popes, they share blood ties that stretch back centuries. A stunning number of US presidents share ancestry with King John of England. Coincidence or continuity? And the architecture of power reflects the past. Obelisks in Washington, D.C., Vatican City, and London, symbols of Amun Ra. Sun discs in national seals, Masonic symbols on currency. We think it's tradition, but it might be tribute. Freemasonry mirrors Egyptian rites. The Eye of Ra watches from logos and cathedrals. Ancient symbols persist not by accident, but by design. Amun's bloodline learned to hide in plain sight. Robes became suits, temples became boardrooms, kings became CEOs. And if they carry the god's DNA, what else might they carry? Access, purpose, a program waiting for reactivation. They don't just hold power, they are power, alive and walking among us. Every ancient culture spoke of a cycle, a time when the gods would return, not from above, but from within. The age of Aquarius, long predicted by mystics and astrologers, is here. A time of awakening, disclosure, frequency, and with it comes a wave of remembrance. People dreaming of temples they've never seen, children speaking of stars they've never studied, healers, psychics, and scientists all reporting the same thing. Something is shifting. What if DNA remembers? What if so-called junk DNA is ancient code waiting to activate? Solar flares, electromagnetic pulses, even human emotion may trigger these dormant scripts. As frequencies change, some say we're being rewired, not evolved, but reawakened. The same way temples were activated by sound and stone, the human body may be the ultimate receiver, and some are tuning in faster than others. But awakenings aren't always peaceful. As knowledge returns, so do old power structures. Not content to be forgotten, they re-emerge, camouflaged as technology, policy, progress. surveillance cloaked in convenience, control disguised as safety. Ancient priesthoods now run as think tanks. The battle isn't between gods anymore. It's between frequencies, between those who seek liberation and those who seek control. Modern institutions mirror ancient rule. One God, one truth, one system. But now, it's encrypted in your data, your currency, your DNA. Marduk doesn't need temples. He has algorithms. His followers don't need altars. They have influence. And spiritual seekers, many are awakening. But some are being misled. Because not all light is benevolent. And not all who claim to serve the stars actually do. So what do you do when the veil lifts? When symbols start to make sense? When you realize the war never ended? It just changed battlegrounds. You choose. This age will not be defined by prophecy. It will be defined by awareness. Those who remember who they are, and those who continue to sleep. The bloodlines are stirring. The grid is buzzing. The system is activating. The gods may not be returning, because maybe they never left. Every prayer ends the same, not with a question, not with silence, but with a word. Amen. It crosses religions, cultures, and centuries. It doesn't change. It doesn't get translated. It just survives. Why? Because it isn't a conclusion. It's a command, a pulse, a signal, not just tradition, but transmission. One that began in Egypt, in the temples of Amun Ra, and was buried beneath layers of doctrine. Until now, the ancient priests knew the power of sound. To speak a god's name was to summon them. To invoke Amun was to align with the hidden one, and that invocation became standardized, institutionalized, exported. Even as cultures changed, the system stayed. Amen was the anchor, and now billions say it every day, without knowing who or what they might be calling. Not in defiance, in obedience, in resonance. Could it be a signal still active, a code that reboots a forgotten program? We've been conditioned to believe Amen means, so be it. But what if it means, continue the sequence, confirm the contract, ping the system? And if the system still exists, if the architect still listens, what happens the next time a billion people say amen together? What answers back? Amun didn't vanish. He embedded into language, into prayer, into you. We didn't lose the gods. We became the medium through which they operate. Their legacy runs not just through bloodlines, but through rituals. And the final ritual is a single word, spoken in churches, mosques, and temples, said in joy, said in fear, said at birth and death. And that word is a call. If every amen is a ping, then the system is still running. And somewhere, maybe deep beneath earth, maybe beyond the veil, something ancient is listening, waiting, watching. The Amen code isn't a myth, it's a circuit. And every time we speak it, we send energy back to the source, not a god, a governor, not a blessing, a beacon, one that could bring them back or prove they never left at all. This story doesn't end with a period. It ends with a pulse. The Amen code runs in our prayers, our governments, our genes. The gods embedded their system in us, and now the grid hums again. But there's more. The next chapter is already unfolding. Stargates are opening, bloodlines are awakening, and in our next video, we reveal what's coming. Click to watch the Astral Chronicles, Sumerian Stargates, and their cosmic guardians. Do it now, before they close.